I think first of all, the question is how do we organize the new global order when it comes to the Arctic and the Antarctic? Our present system is obviously outdated because it dates back to the days of the Cold War, and with the arrival of China as the emerging new global power, this original or strategic construct cannot continue. The question is, to what extent are we able to get China to become a full member in terms of the initiatives, in terms of the organizational structure, and a member, a player following the rule of law? I think that is the biggest problem at the moment. When we look at, for example, Australia, when we look at the UK, when we look at Canada, the United States, those countries are democracies, those countries are following the rule-based order. With Russia and China, this is questionable. Being an international lawyer, one of my main fields of interest and research is how law is being used or abused in the greater power game among the nations. And we call that lawfare. That is the use or the abuse of law to achieve political and other strategic objectives. And one of those examples for the abuse of law, one can call it malicious lawfare, we have seen in the Russian attempt to extend its continental shelf. It was just a couple of years ago that Russia approached the Arctic Council with a new proposal, which basically gave Russia up to 200 nautical miles more continental shelf, and by doing that, expanding the exclusive economic zones. China has done the same with its activities of terraforming in the South China Sea. Now, while the South China Sea obviously is not the Arctic or the Antarctic, it can serve as a reminder what type of measures, what type of activities we can expect. So, for me, the biggest challenge is how do we enforce compliance with the international rule of law and a rule-based order? I have to concede that reality has changed, and we very often look at duality, for example, peaceful, non-peaceful, when it comes to initiatives, when it comes to technological developments. We know that, for example, both Arctic and Antarctic are supposedly to be weapon-free, non-militarized. At the same time, it's been used for GPS and the Chinese equivalent for the positioning systems. These positioning systems are essential for example, modern warfare. Any basically airborne assets are guided by GPS. Is that already militarization, or is it time to talk about maybe to revisit the concepts? Next thing, climate change. Climate change and the impact. We talk about already how the Arctic is changing and how suddenly routes, which were always blocked by permanent ice, become suddenly manageable for ships. And it already has now a complete new sort of dimension when it comes to the exploitation and also when it comes to shipping, etc., etc. So my question is now, if we continue to see the developments which we rightly so associate with climate change, global warming, and then we look at the Arctic and the Antarctic, particularly Antarctic, and we think about the potential for exploitation. And then we look at how it has been at the moment managed and how it's understood. And my question is, how long will it take until research stations turn actually into demarcations lines for future exploitation? So I'm very worried about the future, and I think that it doesn't help that we have a sort of, I would say, Cold War II, at least in regards to Russia. And in regards to China, we are in a sort of hybridity, I would say, a state of potential conflict, not necessarily militarily, but we see China more of an adversary than a partner. And that does not help in order to find a consensus which allows us actually to continue to use and to protect both regions. So I think, and that is something which not only in academia, also when it comes to national security is of absolute essence, we have to raise awareness. We can only become resilient if we raise awareness. So how do you raise awareness? You raise awareness by having discussions, by influencing national curricula with subjects like, for example, the science of climate change, with the full criticism. I always believe in a balanced approach. And then also basically talking about, for example, the different fields affected by this new scramble for the Arctic and the Antarctic. And that is international relations, that is law, just to take one or two examples, science. And I think it is important that if we can raise an awareness, and if that awareness then, with governmental assistance or without governmental assistance, can lead to the development, for example, of specialized postgraduate, for example, study opportunities. Or if, for example, universities at the strategic level decide, for example, to set aside modest amounts to, for example, enable Australian funded research, which is less biased, and it's not basically automatically accused of that this research is being funded by a third party. If we can achieve that, then I think that we're going in the right direction, that awareness is being raised, but also backed up by scientific and academic research and engagement.